Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of The Way It Is. I am your host, Luca Andolfato with Remax Service First Realty, and I am, I'm always delighted to have guests. That's that's one of the best things about this podcast, whole gig. And so I'm fortunate to have with us Jenna Paget, and Jenna is a registered nurse at Kingston General Hospital, and she is a client, daughter of clients, longtime clients. And so the first thing I'm going to ask Jen is, how are your parents?
They're doing really well. Yeah, they're keeping safe and they're healthy, and we're just all kind of getting by together. So,
Okay, well, great. So Jenna has been nursing since 2008, and mainly with general surgery patients. And so now you wrote me in your little note that when COVID hit, your floor was dissolved, and then you were made into that COVID unit, and then you moved around to all kinds of different departments. So why don't you tell us, where things are now? Why don't we just start with that?
yeah, I'm probably on my fifth different position since about a year now. Last year I was on a general surgery floor that I'd been on for about 11 years. And with everything going on, they decided to kind of dissolve our unit, make it more of a medicine type of unit for kind of the patient population that was more in need at the time. And then we were kind of thrown onto another unit where it was mainly going to be COVID type patients, which lasted for a few months. And then we were kind of moved around to a virtual study where we were following patients after surgery at home for about 30 days. And then I'd moved around to an orthopedic unit and then now I find myself on a cardiac surgery, thoracics, plastics. And now with everything going on, and it's kind of a heightened, kind of a COVID situation going on, our orthopedic floor has actually now been dissolved as well. And it's been increased to kind of accommodate for our ICU. So our ICU used to be kind of just 2 floors, and now it's kind of engulfed another 39 beds on the old orthopedic unit. So we find ourselves kind of covering everything.
So and obviously you're not the only registered nurse that's having to sort of be as versatile as you have been, I guess, getting sort of moved around to all the kinds of different where you're needed.
Yeah, no,
right?
and we've we've heard redeployment from everybody from surgery, from clinics, from medicine kind of units. Right now, we don't have a whole lot of critical care nurses, so they've found themselves trying to do some pod nursing and taking heavier loads. So they have they call them high intensity nurses, where they're kind of grouped with a nurse that's more critical care, and they're helping them out to do other tasks, because usually their ratio would maybe be 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, and now sometimes they're 2 or 3-to-1, and they could all be vented. So it just depends on the day. We seem to get a lot of patients from all over the area, whether that be through Orange, like the helicopter transfers, or they'd be busing them in, or by ambulance. So people that maybe had no experience in critical care find themselves now being part of a pod, as they call it, or a group just helping out, or because they've essentially kind of canceled a lot of surgeries, just more emergency cases. I have some friends in the recovery unit that've been redeployed to ICU, where they don't feel all that comfortable there either, but it seems to be that's where the needs are. And they've been pretty good at offering training and support in that sense, but it's just all kind of happened so quickly in another way as well that it can be a bit scary.
So yeah, and I think that's, I'm no different than everybody else, but I'm sure, COVID is obviously top of mind and has all the news headlines, but we forget that life still happens, and accidents are happening, and people are still arriving in the ER, and people are still needing surgeries or emergency surgeries, and they still need beds, right? So what have you seen? Now, I know, going back to when, the very first, over a year ago, the first lockdown, well, I dare say when people took it more seriously. But anyway, it struck me that the silence, that there weren't as many sirens that you'd heard out in the streets. But now I think that's, you tell me, have the levels gone back to a normal level, or how are you finding those sort of emergency cases that outside of COVID coming in?
I mean, it's interesting because I look to see who's an emerge, and a lot of times it's all surgical patients and they don't have beds, because we went from essentially having 4 surgical units to now just 2. Hotel Dieu has opened up some space. Their recovery unit over there is now taking kind of an offload of some surgeries. They had opened a new surgery unit over at Hotel Dieu that's now been kind of switched over to medicine to kind of accommodate for that growing need as well. But yeah, like accidents still happen. There's still emergencies, things you can't predict. Patients that were put on hold last year are now coming in sicker because they should have been done probably 6 months ago, but we couldn't accommodate them. So now they're coming in sicker, and then they're having to stay longer. And their recovery just takes that much longer because they're that much sicker.
Wow. Now, have your number of shifts increased as well, or is it like number of hours physically working increased?
Yeah, I mean, overtime is kind of constant. I'll get a call constantly for days, nights, evenings. I do a set of 12, so I'll do 2 days and 2 nights, like a 7 to 7. So my shifts are always busy. A bed never stays empty for very long. If it's not a surgical patient, it'll be some type of patient that's in need. So it's constantly go. If we've been pretty lucky to have staff, but I know we've gone short before. Other units have gone short. It's just, I can't imagine our staffing department, how they have to handle that, because we never seem to have enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for a while, and maybe still happening, they were recruiting those that were recently retired from nursing. Is that still happening? Are there still?
Yeah. As far as I know they were asking anyone who still has their license, who maybe could help out. I know of someone that had retired and then had come back casually and has now come back as a part-time, only because there isn't a whole lot for people to do as a retiree. They feel they want to help, or they're, if you're confined to a space, whether that be an apartment or somewhere that doesn't even have an outdoor area, it's not much of a retirement. I know for some people.
Yeah. Well, especially, now's the time when anyone who's reached that stage in their lives after a career, they wanted to be traveling, they wanted to be visiting grandchildren, they wanted to be visiting children, right? And that's not happening very often, right?
Well, it can be very isolating. I know when everything first happened and I was on the COVID unit, I was essentially, because I live alone, my fiance wasn't coming over, I wasn't seeing family. So we were primarily I was seeing people either at work, or I didn't see anybody at all. So I can imagine if you were retired and you didn't have anyone else in your home, it could be really isolating. And you do need that social aspect. So whether it be, at a tough spot in the hospital, at least you're getting that, contact with people.
Yeah. And so, help me understand, like, you go into a shift, what's your regimen? What's the protocol? You've got, what kind of PPEs are you using? What's all that all about? I mean, I only see the snippets of clips from CBC and stuff. So I guess I kind of want to get a firsthand take on it.
Well, now there's only 2 entrances that we're allowed to use to get into work. And we have to have a mask before we enter the hospital. Before, it used to be we could use like a fabric mask, but now it has to be a special surgical mask that we put on. And then we have to read a section of questions, which changes often because there's new restrictions, new lockdown areas, or, heightened spots. So we need to be able to pass all of those questions. And then we either can scan our badge as a proceed or stop. And then we have to speak to the screener. And then by the time you get to your unit, we have to switch over to a higher kind of grade mask. And then we either need to wear goggles or a visor all day. So that we keep on all day. In our back room, we're only allowed 4 in our back room. Just the size of it is not big enough for us to space out. So they have a separate area as well where people can eat and drink with their masks off to be safe, especially if they don't pass some of the questions or they have to isolate at work. Right. And then if we're going into special rooms, we wear gowns and whatnot, but most of the time it's just a heightened mask, and I wear goggles, but you have to wear that all the time.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Now, have majority of the staff now and yourself been vaccinated?
Yeah, most of us, because our we're on a cardiac part of the cardiac program. Our floor opened up sooner to get the vaccine. So I got my first dose in March, and it is a 16-week wait. So the most of us are going to be getting our second dose in June or July.
Wow.
Luckily, most of the ICU, they were all offered doses, I think, back in February, which was great. But we're all still kind of waiting for that next dose, as is everybody.
Yeah. And I don't want to make this too controversial, if you will. I mean, this podcast is more about just providing information to my listeners and my audience. And I'm, maybe as I get longer into it, maybe I will say more controversial things. But, is there some vaccine hesitancy amongst staff at the hospital or frontline workers? Is that, do you see that? Have you experienced that?
I've seen some. Most of my colleagues, we were really excited to get the vaccine. A lot of us like to travel and get together, and so we felt that was kind of a way to get to that kind of sooner. But I spoke with some people from whether that was in the float pool, so they float around to multiple units, whether that even be ICU, and they were hesitant. There isn't a lot of research about it. It's very new. So some people just kind of wanted to hang back and see kind of first and kind of get a bit more information before they went ahead. So I do know there are some people that are hesitant, but I also know a lot of people that were really excited to get it and kind of were, they would have been first in line if they were allowed to be.
Right. I'm assuming you've had the Pfizer.
Yes, correct? That's what was offered at KGH.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and now, as I'm sure you followed the news too, all last week we had that conflicting information from the NSA or whatever they are in terms of if you can wait, get the Pfizer or the Moderna versus the AstraZeneca. And I'm sure, I know that's probably thrown a few people into a bit of a stir in terms of, what you should do or what you shouldn't do. I mean, for me, I know personally it's been very frustrating because at my age now, I'm at 55. I qualified for when it was available at the pharmacies. And so I signed up. I'm going to say it's going to be 6 weeks now, and I still wasn't called in for an appointment. Now I'm fortunate that I went to the KFL&A site and I'm eligible now this Thursday. Apparently I'm going to get one. Now, I don't know which vaccine I'll get. I'm presuming it's going to be the Pfizer one, but I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to get anyone for sure. Yeah. I do have my concerns about the AstraZeneca. The only reason I say that is simply because the individuals I know personally that have had it have had bad reactions to it. Oh, okay. And for me, it's just a matter of going down for 48 hours or feeling crappy for 48 hours. Doesn't thrill me. Of course, I'm sure it doesn't thrill anybody, but I know the second shot of the Pfizer is going to have the same because that's the shot that actually has a piece of the virus in it, if I'm not mistaken, right? Because it's the AstraZeneca now that has the virus in it. Moderna and Pfizer don't have that till the second shot, correct?
Yep.
Right. Okay. How do you feel Kingstons done in terms of, combating or dealing with the health protocols and COVID in Kingston, and then maybe take it more macroly and if you want to give a comment on the province? Because I mean, you're there in the trenches, obviously, every day and during your shifts, and I'm sure everyone's got an opinion. So share. It'd be great to hear a local opinion on that.
I mean, it was frustrating to begin with. I know we were all hoping that come 2021, there'd be this kind of magical switch that things would be better and vaccine rollout would be smooth, and it's kind of seemed to be anything but that. It was a bit it's frustrating because I know everybody would like their vaccine now, and there just wasn't the availability of it for everybody. And with all these different kind of vaccines, everyone does kind of have their high hopes for which one they get. And when my parents went to get theirs, they didn't know what they were going to be getting until they got there. So it was kind of, just it's better to get something versus nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
And especially the side effects of the vaccines are a lot less than getting COVID, which is it's been pretty terrible for a lot of people, but it does get frustrating. I know before our big lockdown happened, because I drive right down King Street, and when Breakwater Park was loaded with people, and it was a nice day, and I understand when people are in an apartment and they don't have an outdoor space, but it was quite frustrating to see people out there like nothing was wrong, and I'm driving to work and I have to put a mask on all day and goggles, and I have friends who work in the ICU, and just some of the stories they would tell of some really sick people, families that were all affected, not just an individual. And sometimes they had been spread out through multiple hospitals. So, I haven't been in the hospital as a patient myself, but just if I was unwell and I had no family, it's one thing to have a Zoom call, which a lot of them can set up for family, but getting people from all different areas of the province, some don't speak English, and it can be quite, upsetting or scary for them when they do wake up that they have no idea what's going on and what's happening.
Yeah. And that's been one of my biggest bones of contention throughout all of this. And again, the pragmatics of how you even would have implemented it. But I know that, the increased case counts, I have to believe stemmed from the fact that people still are going into other health regions from outside of their own health region, which may be in a hotspot or whatever. And I mean, it doesn't take, it's pretty commonsensical if you look at the stats and you see the three largest hotspots are Peel, Durham, and the Greater Toronto area. And I know personally, I see people here coming to Kingston all day, every day from those areas. And I'm sure the hospital, apart from the ones that they're moving now from other hospitals, but you tell me, I think the cases that we have in Kingston a majority of them are from outside of our health region, right? They're not even local.
No. And I know that issue with the construction site. I mean, they have people from all over to do different projects. We don't, they come from all over because we don't have everyone in the same region that can perform those tasks. So, I mean, that's kind of inevitable, but at the same time, they provide them a site where my fiance works in construction, and then they all are in the same trailer to have their breaks. Well, and then when they all have their masks on, and then you think, well, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, it's just kind of inevitable that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it just gets really frustrating, but you try and make the best of it. And we've got really good supports at the hospital. Morale it can be low, but I mean, everyone tries to, put a brave face on and get through the day. So
what, with this next vaccine rollout, which I think we're supposed to be swimming in it from what I'm understanding now, by the end of the month, what's your, I guess, projections in terms of percentage of vaccinations versus things getting back to, a place where you're, at least where you go to work, then, they're going to have, things are going to get back to a bit of a more
normalcy.
Schedule or whatever and stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. It's tough. I know my fiance's family is excited to get the vaccine. They recently just kind of qualified to get that. So they had a hard time getting vaccine appointments at pharmacies, but going on that KFL&A site, they were able to get one for Friday. So I know a lot of people that are eager to go and get that done. I know at the hospital we're eager to get things kind of moving along, because everyone would like to kind of get back to socializing and traveling and doing things like that. So I know, in order to do that, you kind of need to be safe. You need to kind of follow the rules. And yes, it's kind of sucks to have to kind of quarantine yourself. But if we have to do that for a little bit longer in order for us to kind of get out and get back to our normalcy, I know a lot of us are willing to do that. I do know I've laxed myself. I know last year I was wiping down groceries and being really careful where I was coming and going. And now I'm a bit more relaxed. I mean, there is nowhere to go, but with groceries and things like that, I've become a bit more relaxed. So I don't know. I think
you're no different than I am. I'm the same way. I mean, when I used to come home with the groceries and I would take everything out of the boxes and wash everything. And now it's like, I'm throwing it in the cupboard.
Yeah. So. And I think, okay, well, it's fine. I'm good at washing my hands. I'm sanitizing. I'm good at putting the mask on, and that's fine. I'll do all those things. And, and I try and shop in the morning after I finish my night shift, so I can avoid those areas when it's high volumes. I don't really, some of those places can get really busy, and I find they're
Yeah.
not really regulating who comes in. Some of those bigger places. So
Yeah, no,
makes
no,
me
I
nervous.
get it. I get it. No, and I understand your apprehension. I agree. You got to go in those windows when you hope to be it's quieter than sort of the rush times.
Mhm.
What's been the case count as far as healthcare workers or staff at the hospital? Have there been a lot of COVID cases internally with staff going
Um,
down?
I don't. We've had a few pop up here and there. A lot of them were from outside. They weren't actually infected in the hospital. Whether it was from maybe traveling or associating with a family member that had maybe traveled,
Hmm.
but they were great with contact tracing and then isolating. And I don't believe it may have spread maybe to maybe a one or two others, but I believe they'd been roommates. So otherwise, they've been pretty good to kind of contain things. We're wearing masks all day and we're keeping our distance when possible. Patients are now asked to wear masks when we enter rooms. So, I find that we're doing the best we can kind of with what we can do.
Sure. And then I mean you touched on it earlier. You live on your own, and
Mhm.
so for you it's easy to when you get home to stay isolated
Yeah.
and but for those staff or nursing or frontline workers that have families at home, and now with obviously everybody's stuck at home doing the online learning again and everything
Yeah.
like that. I know, wasn't there a program or was the government helping to put if they needed to sort of isolate from their family, because sometimes in their own home they couldn't find the space to do that. Were they subsidizing hotels or were they putting them up in hotels? Was that
I
happening?
heard about it last year. I think they had offered some space at Queens residencies for
Oh,
staff members if they had wanted. I was going to have some coworkers stay with me because I had a spare room. They were when we were working on the COVID unit or directly with COVID patients. She just didn't feel safe to go home to her kids
yeah.
and her husband and kind of potentially expose them to anything. So there were a lot of opportunities for people. I was more than welcome to have somebody stay here with me. I don't know about right now if they're offering spaces for people.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, well, and I mean, again, it's you got to do what you got to do, right? So that's the thing, and that was great of you to even offer that for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so, and congratulations, by the way. I found out when I called you up and that you are engaged. So
Oh
fantastic!
yes, yes.
Congratulations. Now your fiance is local, then?
He is. Yes, he lives in Kingston as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, have you booked your actual wedding, or are you going to wait for all of this to
No.
blow over and stuff like
Well,
that?
we did. We actually booked January of 2020 for July of 2021 at Fort Henry, but we've rescheduled. Just we didn't feel we'd be having the wedding we'd planned. I mean, we thought last year, oh, this should probably be better by this year, and then we find ourselves kind of in the same spot as we were last year. So we thought, well, let's just maybe kind of we'll just rearrange things. I mean, it's hard now because we're competing with 2020, 2021 weddings. Our wedding is now
Yeah,
on a Friday instead of a Saturday because there were no Saturdays available. So you make do with it. It's fine. It's just another year.
yeah.
Well,
Well, and I think I think people are rethinking the concept of what's important for those events, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, as long as you have the ceremony with those, whether it's virtually or those that need to be there with you, then always, once this all ends, which surely to goodness it will,
yes.
then everybody will be having their celebratory get-togethers and life celebrations for all those sadly that lost loved ones during this whole
Mhm.
time, and then the good ones, good stories about those that have had, getting married or had children even, because
Yeah.
there's lots of life goes on. That's the whole part about this that's hard to get your head around, is that we're the world's still turning and things are still happening in normal ways, in terms of people are getting pregnant, people want to get married, people want to do these kinds of
All these
things,
things,
right?
my best friend just had a baby and she was pregnant for the for the lockdown, and I still haven't seen them. And we had a funeral that we watched through Zoom because they're only allowed so many there. And some people from 2020, they had to reschedule their weddings for this year, and then now they're rescheduling again, or they're going through with it and just delaying a reception until another time. And they're all really tough choices, and you feel like, yeah, like life continues on whether the COVID is here or not. It's just adapting to a new, how do we do this safely? We just, everyone wants to kind of get back to to how we
Yeah.
used to do things. So
And I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and so I guess, I wonder, and I'm sure a lot of people wonder, but life at the hospital, I guess, emotionally and mentally, for those that are on the front lines, is still good. I mean, I'm sure like there's peaks and valleys, but people are sticking to it, right?
yeah, I mean, we have our moments. I think ICU has a lot, critical care has it a lot harder than we do. They're making the same amount that I do, and I feel like they're working, hard. They're working very hard in constraints where it's, it's their license, and this is kind of what they're set forth to do, and you can't abandon your patients. So you're kind of, I'll do the best I can. But I mean, morale is up and down. It depends. They tried to do some pod nursing where they would group essentially almost 12 or 15 patients with 2 nurses and a PCA to try and maybe skim the line a little bit to try and disperse some nurses, and that didn't go very well. Things get missed, med errors. So that was kind of a trial period. I think they're gonna go back to the drawing board on that one. But
Right.
Just stress is high, and trying to watch the news and then going into work, and it can be a lot of, frustrating, upsetting news. So it's, it's good to have a laugh at work. Our coworkers are really supportive, and we have good teamwork, at least on my unit. I know that the units try and, do the best they can. So yeah.
Well, and you raise a really interesting point, and so because especially you never leave it, right? If you're in it when you're on your shift, then you go home, and if you're watching the news, so what do you do to break that cycle and empty your brain and try to distract yourself?
Well, I get a lot of recommendations for TV shows, but I find a lot of them are dramas or just something really sad. And I was like, I can't take any more sad. Like, I just can't. I need to laugh. So it's a lot of like some good funny shows, or just like having a bath, or just being outside. Luckily, like there's some sun today, but like the last few weeks, it's been so dreary and rainy. And I mean, I think my last set, it was all rain for 5 days, and then I didn't feel recharged to go back to work. So, I mean, that can kind of set a tone for your 4 shifts, especially if I get there almost a half hour before I start, and sometimes I'm there a half hour after. So a 13-hour day. It's a long day. And if, most of the time patients, they can be sad days, and that can be really taxing on everyone. So I try and watch a little bit of the news. I don't watch a whole lot because it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, no, I certainly get that. And, you're right. There's a lot of stuff not to watch on TV. No. There's, it's funny. I'm not a big social media guy, and I know there's certain people that think you got to do all of this or whatever. And I mean, I do the bit that I need to do, I suppose. But there's a comic. I will tell you. I'll give you my recommendation because it just came up on my feed, and he's this British comic called Peter Kay. And the guy's priceless and hilarious, and it's good, clean comedy, and it's all from 2020, and it's actually I'll watch the 2-minute video of his or whatever, and I've yet to not laugh during one of his one of those little videos.
I'll have to check it out then.
So you have to look for that for sure. So. Yeah, well, listen, I want to thank you for taking the time today, and I want to thank you for giving us some insight into your world and into, the nursing world. And as we have all known from day one, frontline workers are bearing the brunt of this, sadly, because that's who they are, and that's what they're called to do. And and I want to wish you all the best, and stay safe, and say hi to your folks. And I'm glad they're vaccinated. And I'll look forward to catching up with you once this is all over and everything like that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's nice to chat about it.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jenna. Okay, you take care. Bye-bye.